read, I guess. It's just a longer list, saying more or less the same thing, so let's go on. These were the political targets. This is now a fairly recent, well, already 2009, so years passed by quickly, but there was a very much cited paper being published in 2009 by a large group of researchers led by Johan Rockström, where this graph has been very often shown, and it shows actually that if you look at the global scale, we have the green area here, so that would symbolize the allowable emissions for on the global scale for certain well, environmental impacts, to be more general. So you have the climate change category here, and then the red area shows the actual level of impact, or actual level of emission in this case, and it exceeds the green area, so that's the way to read this graph. So we have some other categories where we are still have some more space to operate, and we have some that are extremely far out of the green zone, and then we have a few that were in this case not even quantified because they were considered not possible at the time to quantify, and they are still not completely quantified, I would say. But it's more or less saying the same thing as the previous two slides. It's just relating the emissions, or in fact in this case it's also land use, so the various impacts that are considered relevant in relation to some kind of ecological operating space. Okay, and this of course can be translated into numbers if you want to, and applied in an LSA context. I wanted to say something about possibilities to apply this concept also on resource use. I already mentioned that for water there is already work that has gone on for a few years, so we are almost there, or there are actually working methods how to deal with water footprint, and they deal with water scarcity as well as reduction of water quality in terms of pollution. The water scarcity issue can be illustrated in a number of ways, but this is shown here in this graph for global aluminium production. So basically each dot represents one plant of aluminium production globally, and well, actually it's bauxite, so it's the raw material that later on gives aluminium. And for each of these dots you have the volume, well, the amount of bauxite produced, and they are arranged in this order in order to get this nice shape, in relation to the water availability in the particular area where these sites are located. So essentially for these dots that are to the left side of this red line here, they are located in areas where you have water scarcity, so they are, let's say, critical somehow, whereas these other plants are located in areas where water is not such an issue from a scarcity point of view. Okay, go on. Similar type of graph for copper production, and similar shape. So again, you have a number of plants that are located in areas where you can expect, or where there is in fact water scarcity, so you have to take certain precautions there, obviously. Next please. Next please. Yeah. So when we are going to deal with this analysis like the Rockström graph with the red and green areas, of course there has to be some kind of criteria to define this threshold that should not be overgone. And you can do this in, so again, it's, the purpose here is to show you actually that, okay, we can always try to set some kind of threshold like this, but in fact setting the threshold is also a process that involves humans and some kind of not completely objective have to have some kind of decision process how to define what is actually the criteria that we're going to use to define this critical level. But let's not go into the details for all of them. Let's just say that, okay, it's good to have this kind of critical load or threshold, sustainability threshold concept, but still when you establish this threshold, you need to have some kind of subjective decisions along the way anyway. Okay, fine, next please. Okay, let's go into the monetarization a little bit further. This is, sorry, but I'm giggling a little bit, but it's funny. I mean, when you go outside your, let's say, normal, for Swedish people, Greek is a very difficult language. Let's start there. So sometimes when you get into a science domain that you're not familiar with, people in Sweden, I sometimes say, oh, this is like Greek to me, meaning I don't really understand what it means. It's not to be offensive to the Greek or the Greek language, it's just a matter of saying. So I hope you can live with that. So basically, if we go this deep into the economic science, this is not my home arena. So if you ask me about the full details of the meanings of all these concepts, I wouldn't be able to answer that. Let's just say that if you want to establish some total economic value, there are several ways of doing that. In the end, you come down to some basic concepts here, like market analysis. You can actually, for example, look at the impact that air pollution has on the growth of crops. And there you can simply say that, okay, we have a reduction of growth with 10%, and the market value of that reduction is so and so. There are some issues where you have a more shadow pricing mechanism, maybe. The typical example here is that if you want to know the value of noise, you can look at house prices on different distances away from airports, for example, and you can relate that to the noise level, and you can find some good relations there. But it's also, well, there are a couple of mechanisms in place. You can also, of course, somehow, but it's a slightly different way of looking at things. If you look at how can you avoid the problem and what does it cost to abate this emission, for example. Of course, that comes with a cost, but it's exactly what Stern did was that he looked at the abatement cost and also to these other mechanisms and then compared them and said, well, it's much cheaper to actually do something about this than let the damage happen. Okay? And yeah, the other, let's say, family of concept is to actually go out to the people in general, or yeah, to do some kind of survey. What are you actually willing to pay for certain things that you want to be able to use maybe in the future? And that's called contingent valuation, different methods. Okay, next please. Yeah, this is what I just said, so let's go on. And this is a very complicated graph, maybe you think. The idea here is that this is the structure of the Japanese LCIA method, life cycle impact assessment line. So it's more or less the same type of graph as the one I had with arrows going from the outside to a center, but here it's a bit more complex because it also acknowledged that some emissions contribute to different types of impacts. But in the end, this line method ends up with a yen number, so it's a monetary valuation approach. And the example I pointed out is that lead can be emitted to air, in which case it causes urban air pollution. That leads to respiratory problems, and that leads to human health, and the human health can be valued in a disability adjusted life year assessment, and then you can translate that into an economic value. Okay, it's controversial to put economic value to human life, but there are still people that do this kind of thing. So as well, as LCA practitioners, we can rely on what other people do, like insurance companies when they pay money for invalidity and things like this, or when the national road authorities build roads because they want to avoid lethal accidents, and they put a certain amount of money into that, and in principle it leads to a relation between lethality and the cost that society puts into avoiding those. Just to give you a couple of examples. Okay, next please. Yeah, the other part, let's say, how to link the actual concentration to the actual damage on human health is illustrated here. An example is lead, and it has been found then that, don't ask me how, but anyway, the mechanism or the concept here is that higher exposure to lead leads to reduced intelligence. And so basically, if you have different concentrations in drinking water, it leads to different dose rates. This is just a linear, and this is also just linear basically in this particular case. So each concentration in drinking water will in principle lead to some kind of average reduction in intelligence in the population being exposed to this drinking water, and there is a damage cost associated with that, because it is then assumed that intelligence reduction has cost some kind of cost to society. And again, I didn't make these numbers, so I cannot take responsibility for them, but they are there, so they can in principle be used with caution. Next please. So in the end we come up with more or less long lists of value factors like this, and let's go on, because the important or interesting thing is when you compare different systems. Next one again please. This one is more interesting, and I'm sorry that the numbers may be difficult to see. Of course, well, so basically this is a table listing the system that was actually developed by Swedish scientists, στην, the EPS system, the Japanese LIME system, and this external that I've mentioned before was a European project. And we tried to make it coherent, to translate everything to euros per unit, but then these different units are not necessarily completely translatable between each other. But for example, the EPS system has a number of values for different, let's say, degrees of reduced quality of life, whereas the LIME method has one number for human health. But you can still see that the human health value in the Japanese method is somewhere in the same range as the life expectancy or severe morbidity damages in the EPS system. And in the external, it's rather down here that you have the YOL, years of lost life expectancy reduction. That's also, well, let's say within the same order of magnitude at least. But of course there are differences in numbers depending on your cultural context and a lot of other things, and also of course the level of income, because if you ask people how much they are willing to pay to achieve certain things, that statement then made has to do with